right, good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thanks so much to my co-authors and to the coalition that put this bill together and for all the work that they do. I want to tell you about a conversation I had a few years ago, several years ago actually. It's haunted me ever since. I was a Deputy Attorney General at the time, a supervising Deputy Attorney General overseeing California's anti-human trafficking work. And I was in a small conference room with a girl named Julie. We were preparing her to testify against the man who trafficked her. And to prepare, we were looking at some photographs and pictures, mainly of injuries that she had sustained. Her legs had bruises on them, her arms had wounds and scratches and bruises in various stages of healing. I turned to one photograph that had kind of a knot on the side of her head, kind of a knot with a gash on it, and I passed it over to her. And she looked at me, and she said, very matter-of-factly, "Oh, that wasn't him, that was a John," meaning that it wasn't her trafficker, it was a buyer. And I asked her, well, what happened to him? I knew it was kind of a stupid question, right? Nothing ever happens to the buyers. But her answer made me sick to my stomach, and it's what's haunted me ever since. She said, "Nah, nothing happens for raping girls like me." That is years of abuse. That is years of people telling her that she didn't matter, that her being a victim didn't matter. It's probably something that her pimp conditioned with her, that conditioned into her, that she internalized, that she normalized. And it's like that for thousands of girls. And here's the thing, California hasn't really addressed it either. California laws, in some ways, have reinforced that normalization. So I'm here today on Assembly Bill 379, after nearly 20 years of work in this space, both representing survivors and prosecuting traffickers. I want to solve two problems with this bill. One, we have to create more resources for victims like Julie and the thousands of other victims who are being trafficked. And two, we have to crack down on the men who are buying them for sex. That's what Assembly Bill 379 does. It creates a law that allows law enforcement to intervene when men are out on the prowl trying to buy victims for sex. It also makes it chargeable as a felony when those victims are under 18 years old. The most important part of the bill is that it sets up a fund to support survivors, a first-of-its-kind fund that will go to community-based organizations, like some of the folks you'll hear from here today, who are doing the tough work of helping these victims see better for themselves and get out of this life. So that's what the bill is about. That's what we're going to be doing. I'm sure you have many questions. I look forward to answering them at the end, but I also have an all-star lineup here with me today. So without further ado, I want to introduce Senator Ana Caballero.
Not as tall as her, so not much of a step. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Senator Ana Caballero, and I represent the 14th Senate District, which includes the counties of Merced, Madera, and Fresno. I'm here today as a proud co-author of AB 379, and I want to thank Assemblymember Krell for leading on this important piece of legislation. You know, when you have life experiences, you can see the solutions and the opportunity to close gaps and to create those solutions is incredibly important. AB 379 addresses a harsh reality, one that affects far too many communities. Children and teenagers, many of them vulnerable and marginalized, are targeted, groomed, and exploited in commercial sex markets. Current law does not go far enough, as you heard, to protect the minors from solicitation, particularly when they are 16 and 17-year-olds, and may not be formally identified as trafficked victims. The bill updates California law to reflect what we know. Any attempt to solicit sex from a minor, regardless of age or status, should be treated as a serious offense. But the bill does more than strengthen enforcement. It changes how we respond to people caught in cycles of exploitation. Too often, those engaged in the sex trade, especially women and girls, are survivors of coercion, poverty, abuse, or trafficking. The bill takes a more compassionate and effective long-term approach to end the cycle. Instead of putting people in jail, AB 379 offers diversion programs for first and second time offenses, connecting individuals to support services and a path towards healing rather than punishment. At the same time, the bill takes a firm stance on accountability. It creates a new misdemeanor for loitering with the intent to buy sex, making it clear that those who fuel exploitation will face consequences. Let me be clear. This bill goes after the buyers, the people who are creating the demand for commercial sex and fueling the exploitation of vulnerable individuals. This is about updating our approach, one that prioritizes support for survivors and real consequences for exploiters. It also, as you heard, establishes the Survivor Support Fund, funded by fines paid by offenders. That money will go directly to community-based organizations who provide trauma-informed care, outreach, and recovery support to victims of sex trafficking and exploitation. As someone who represents rural and low-income communities, I know that trafficking doesn't just happen in big cities. In the Central Valley, many of our youth, especially foster youth and undocumented minors, are particularly vulnerable. AB 379 offers a comprehensive, compassionate, and clear response. It strengthens justice where it is needed most. It protects our children, and it gives survivors a real chance to rebuild their life. I want to thank Assemblymember Krell, my fellow co-authors, and the many survivor-led advocacy organizations who have shaped this thoughtful and important legislation. This bill sends a powerful message. California will not tolerate the exploitation of our youth, and we will invest in real, lasting solutions to protect and support survivors. Thank you very much for being here today.
I am tall, so that makes me even taller. Good morning. My name is Sawan Baden, and I am, and I stand before you as a survivor of sex trafficking and as someone who now leads an organization that walks alongside women and youth impacted by it every day. As I begin my remarks, I want to take some time to say something that too often gets left out of the conversation. We talk about trafficking, we talk about exploitation, but we rarely talk about the root cause. So let me say it plainly. If we do not address demand, we are not serious about ending exploitation or trafficking. Because you cannot have a sex trade without sex buyers. And those buyers, they aren't harmless. They are often affluent men with disposable income, spending it to satisfy their own desires without regard for the harm they cause. When survivors think about their own experiences with buyers, it is not the act of being purchased that sticks with them. They recount stories of being dehumanized, abused, and ultimately thrown aside. This isn't a story of empowerment. It's a story of coercion and the vulnerable struggle to survive. No one wakes up and chooses this life. They are groomed for it, forced into it, and trapped. And one of the biggest traps is poverty. Poverty doesn't just make people vulnerable, it makes them targetable. And instead of disrupting the systems that create this vulnerability, we criminalize survivors. We turn our backs on the exploited while letting the buyers walk away. Now imagine this, a sophomore in high school, she's 16. She's been trafficked by someone who promised her the world. And now she's being bought by grown men, some old enough to be her grandfather. She's afraid, confused, and completely alone. Under current California law, she's not offered the same protections as a 15-year-old. As if turning 16 magically makes her capable of consenting to being bought. How does this make sense? It doesn't. And that's what AB 379, and that's why AB 379 matters. It recognizes that no child, 15, 16, or 17, should ever be treated like they can consent to being bought. It closes a dangerous loophole and sends a clear message. Our youth are not for sale. But we can't stop there. We need real investment in survivor-led organizations doing the hard, messy, life-changing work every day. Because it's not enough to pass laws, we need resources, we need housing, we need healing, we need hope. AB 379 closes these dangerous loopholes and finally invest in survivors. It's not just a step forward, it's a stand for justice. Thank you.
Sheriff, you are up. Best sheriff in Sacramento, best sheriff in America.
Good morning, good to see you all. Thanks for coming here. I want to thank Assemblywoman Krell for AB 379, much needed bill on human trafficking. I also want to thank the Lieutenant Governor. They've come out of operations and seen it firsthand, human trafficking, the toll it takes on these young women and the buyers also. That's so important. In 2021, a bill was passed, and I was present during my time in the legislature and assembly on this bill. I spoke against it, the decriminalization of loitering, and I knew the impact it would have. Fast forward now, 4 years later, as sheriff, I've seen it firsthand. It makes 0 sense. And this bill targets the buyers. They've gotten off for far too long. We've got to change this narrative. In the sex trafficking world, everybody's after the trafficker. Traffickers are golden goose. There's task forces by the Sheriff's Department, Police Department, Homeland Security, FBI. But really, the buyers have been untouched for so long. I know through our stats, we arrested hundreds of buyers here in Sacramento. And Sacramento is one of the prime trafficking grounds in the state. But nothing ever happens to buyers. They're dismissed, it goes on. And we've got to change that narrative. And think about this, in 2024, there were over 300,000 commercial sex ads in the Sacramento region alone. These men do that. If you're a young girl, a young woman, 13, 14, 15, you command a higher fee. They pay a higher fee because they want a younger girl. That is sick. That is what we're dealing with here. And AB 379 goes a long way in helping us change that narrative with these folks. We've also rescued dozens of juveniles as young as 12. So they're out there day in and day out. No one chooses this life. And it is just so tough. These traffickers use force and fear, drugs, to force these victims into that lifestyle. No one wants to be a prostitute. No one ever asked for that. But it's tough to break free. And in my opinion, the buyers are the linchpin. You stop the flow of buyers, it stops it. And as the senator said, these men are willing to pay top dollar for young girls. As it stands now, with the laws the way they're written, we can't even put their face in the newspaper to try and shame them, to make them aware, hey, if you engage and act like this, your friends, your neighbors will know. Why are we protecting them? They're abusing young girls. It makes 0 sense. So I'm excited about it. It's a good bill in the right direction. And when this bill was introduced in 2021, it purported to address an issue that was never really an issue there. The numbers just don't stand out there. When I spoke about it on the floor, I talked about it. These young girls are made to wear panties and a bra during winter or summer, it doesn't matter. Sometimes barely any clothing. So this really helps our girls, the victims that are here, the victim support groups, they know about it. Our MMIP people also, it happens. So let's put a stop to this. Here's our chance. I'm excited about it, to get up, roll up our sleeves and get it done. We have a chance to really change it and put the victims first, these young women. We all have mothers, sisters, daughters, nieces. Imagine if it was one of them in your family. We have to stop this. And I'm grateful to see senators here, Assemblywomen, men and women here. They're supportive of this. They want to change it. So thank you. God bless you. And this bill's going to pass. I have every confidence in Assemblywoman. Thank you so much for having the courage to bring it forward and author it.
Thank you. Lieutenant Governor?
Thank you very much, Assembly Member. I'm Eleni Kounalakis, Lieutenant Governor of California. I'm a former United States Ambassador, and in that capacity, worked on trafficking in persons issues. It has been shocking and horrifying to see the explosion of the number of humans trafficked globally, and especially the numbers that have just increased dramatically here in California. California has 2 of the 4 cities that are considered hotspots across the country. They're Miami, Houston, Los Angeles, and Sacramento. What are we doing in California that these numbers have grown so much? It is very, very disturbing. And so I'm very honored that Assemblymember Krell has allowed me to be a co-sponsor of this legislation. But more than that, I'm just so impressed by her leadership and the leadership of all of the experts here who have written a bill that will truly do something to bring these numbers down and protect more of these girls who are being trafficked. And let's be clear, these are young girls from marginalized communities, underrepresented communities, foster kids who are victimized by the sex trade. And thanks to the experts here, it's really clear that if we do something to create consequences, and you know, for the over 18, there are relatively minor misdemeanor consequences, but there have to be consequences for those who are out there attempting to buy sex from girls in the state of California. This bill does that. So I really want to thank Sheriff Cooper. And frankly, you know, there are a lot of women who are up here. There are men who care about this issue, who care about the victims, and who are determined to do something about it. But Sheriff Cooper in particular, I want to thank because he brought members of my staff and myself included out on these operations late at night to see what's happening for ourselves. And, you know, I hope that there will be widespread recognition here in the Capitol that this is a measured and reasonable approach to dealing with the demand for buying sex, and will create appropriate consequences that will reduce the demand and just by definition reduce the number of transactions and help protect more of these victimized primarily young women. So the support already has been incredible. You're going to hear from more of those folks who Assemblymember Krell has brought on board with this bill. I'm very proud to be part of it and hope to see it passed and see it on the governor's desk soon.
Thank you, Lieutenant Governor. I'd like to call up Police Chief Kathy Lester.
Thank you. Good morning. I really want to thank Assemblymember Krell for leading the effort on this very important bill, and all of our esteemed speakers here today for their continued work in our fight against human trafficking. I'm really just honored to stand with so many partners from not just local government, but advocacy groups and law enforcement as well, because we are working together to protect the victims and hold traffickers accountable, as well as those who buy children for sex. We, at the Sacramento Police Department, we have always emphasized a combined approach of enforcement with partnerships with our survivor support organizations. Advocates are embedded alongside our teams, ready to offer trauma-informed care, shelter, and certainly long-term resources to the victims the moment that they are recovered. So it's not just about making arrests, it's about offering a path forward. We also recognize the importance of offering alternatives to those being exploited. Many of those that we encounter are not offenders. They are survivors, and they need support, not punishment. Another critical piece, and you've heard it up here, is we talk about the demand. We will not make progress on trafficking or these issues if we don't hold those who fuel it accountable. That means targeting the people who purchase sex, especially from minors, and disrupting the systems that allow exploitation to thrive. AB 379 strengthens protections for minors by ensuring that the crime of purchasing a minor for sex applies in any case where the victim is under 18. 16 and 17-year-olds are still children, and they deserve the full protection of the law. Our department is very proud to be part of the Sacramento Regional Human Trafficking Task Force. This is a collaboration between local, state, and federal partners. Since launching that unit in 2020, we filed nearly 100 cases of pimping, pandering, and sex trafficking. Many resulted in convictions, but more importantly, we have helped dozens of survivors escape exploitation. This task force allows us to share resources, to move very quickly, and to focus on both traffickers and those driving demand. So in closing, AB 379 will give us stronger tools to protect victims and hold offenders accountable. We're very grateful to be part of this effort, and we stand ready to support it. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this important piece of legislation.
Thank you, Chief. Next, we have Regina Swellard, Tribal Chairwoman with Shingle Springs. Thank you so much.
Good morning, Sekasim. My name is Regina Cuellar, a chairwoman of the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians, a federally recognized Indian tribe located in El Dorado County. Today, we proudly extend our unwavering support for AB 379, a critical step forward in the fight against sex trafficking and protection of its survivors. An essential component of AB 379 is the establishment of a survivor support fund designed to empower community-based organizations that provide vital support services to trafficking victims. This legislation stands firmly for minors exploited for sex, equipping law enforcement with necessary tools to target the buyers who perpetrate these crimes. As a proud sponsor of AB 1314, which created the Feather Alert System to locate missing or abducted Indigenous persons, we recognize the heartbreaking reality that Indigenous children in Los Angeles County are 5.8 times more likely to be reported as trafficking victims compared to their white peers. Nationally, Native Americans account for 40% of trafficking victims, despite comprising only 3% of the U.S. population. These statistics are unacceptable, and the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians remain steadfast in advocating for change. AB 379 marks an important step in confronting those who prey on Indigenous children and all at-risk youth. It also provides a meaningful pathway for young survivors to escape the sex trade through diversion programs that offer a fresh start. The Survivor Support Fund, comprised of a $1,000 penalty imposed on sex offenders, will provide essential resources such as housing, mental health care, and job training to help survivors heal and rebuild their lives. As chairwoman of a sovereign tribal nation, I stand before you not only representing the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians, but also as a voice for Indigenous communities. Determined to utilize every available tool to combat this epidemic and dismantle the systems that allow it to persist. We commend Assemblywoman Maggy Krell for her unwavering dedication to protecting victims of human trafficking. AB 379 is a powerful demonstration of that effort, and we urge its passage. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here today.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And our final speaker will be District Attorney from San Diego, Summer Stephan.
Hello, I'm Summer Stephan, San Diego County District Attorney, and also the President of the National District Attorneys Association. It is a terrible reality that while President Lincoln thought that he had ended slavery, that today in America, we have human trafficking, modern day slavery, as the second largest criminal industry in our nation. Right after the selling of drugs comes the selling and buying of human beings. The issue is that these human beings, we know through research, through landmark research that took place in my county, the second largest county in California, showed us that the average age for recruitment into sex trafficking is a 16-year-old. And that 90% of our high schools have active cases of human trafficking in our schools, targeting our children. I want you to remember Assemblywoman Maggy Krell's bill, AB 379, not as a number, because unfortunately, that is what our victims experience. They are a number, just there for profit, as a reusable product to be used by people who want to buy them, abuse them, and use them. Not to have a relationship with them, but to rape them while the law allows it to be so. This bill needs to be remembered as California declaring for the first time that our children are not for sale. I am amazed that this is even up for debate. aren't you? I'm amazed that as a prosecutor for over 30 years, who's devoted my life to protecting the most vulnerable, that I get to tell a 16-year-old that was bought for sex and terrible things happened to her, that her crime is less important in the eyes of the law than tagging on an inanimate wall, that more punishment will happen if you spray paint a wall than if you abuse the body of a child. This is unacceptable. It must end. It's time that our laws reflect our values. Enough talking. It's time for we are a land of laws, the rule of law. How can we look in the face of our children knowing that the studies are clear that they're being recruited young, that the average age is 16? How can we tell them that they don't deserve the protection of the laws? This bill does three necessary things that must happen now, not tomorrow. And Maggy Krell, Assemblywoman, knows this because as a fellow prosecutor years ago, she got to look in the eyes of the victims. That's the only way we learn. Not what we see on TV, not what we hear, but actually talking to the victims and survivors and asking them what part of this was okay for them. What part of this was a choice? What part of this was humane? What part of this had any dignity for their spirit and their soul? That's what we all must do, and every legislator when they look at this bill. So the three things that are brilliantly done in conjunction, that is why this is a bill that I helped co-sponsor, because it does these three immediately needed things. One, it provides protection for 16 and 17-year-olds, declaring that the law says clearly that buying them to sexually assault them is not okay. It's a potential felony crime, that they deserve more protection than an inanimate wall. That's one thing it does. The second thing it does is it helps law enforcement stop a criminal buyer before they do their damage. They're able to actually investigate. I personally went to an areas in San Diego to observe for myself a line of cars lined up to pick up people like they're in a hamburger stand, picking up a hamburger, completely not concerned because they know that police can't investigate why they're loitering in this area. Why are they talking to these vulnerable, cold, standing without clothes, young girls and women? In one operation, they told us in this bill that it's all adults. One operation in San Diego, Operation Better Pathways, in a 2-week period, recovered 8 children and 8 adults, the youngest a 13-year-old, multiple 17-year-olds, a 21-year-old pregnant girl, very pregnant, but she was out there because she didn't want the 17-year-old sister she had to not meet her quota. She was there to supply that demand, that selfish, greedy demand. Why would the demand even think what they're doing is criminal when our laws doesn't say it's really criminal? We speak through our laws. The laws must change. The third thing it does is it tells the same people that are paying $500 minimum to abuse a child that they need to put $1,000 fine that will be put into providing restoration to victims that have lost their innocence, don't know where to start in order for them to rebuild their lives. In combination, these three things will begin us on a path of truly addressing human trafficking, of truly taking this seriously, truly addressing what our study showed, that $810 million are being produced in sex trafficking just in San Diego alone. In 1 year, 3,500 victims with an average of a 16-year-old. So I want to thank the Assemblymember Maggy Krell for bringing this forth, and I want to use in honor of Pope Francis, who passed away this morning, his words, where he said, we need to unite. We need to unite to take responsibility and stop human trafficking. This was the words of Pope Francis. And let's be motivated to finally do something. Thank you.
Thank you so much, District Attorney. And the support coalition that you see for this bill is all about united. Is all about unity and uniting. We have folks here from all over the state. I'm proud of my Republican colleagues and appreciate their leadership on this, as well as my Democratic colleagues. We have 21 co-authors on this bill already. But who I want to thank the most here right now is the survivor leaders. Without them, there would be no anti-human trafficking movement and certainly no bill. If survivor leaders who are here wish to stand up, please do so we can thank and acknowledge you. Thanks for your courage, those of you who are up here and those of you who are seated in the seats. Your leadership has really inspired this bill and all the good work that's being done over the last several years in this area. With that, we are up for questions. Yes.
Yeah, Assembly, and maybe the San Diego District Attorney can attest to this. Because Sheriff, I know you're talking about the bill that was authored by Senator Scott Wiener a few years ago. Just want to know, because it was reported in San Diego County that after that bill was passed, there was an escalation in loitering and in prostitution in many of those areas, based on decriminalizing loitering. I just want to know if AB 379 will impact this certain bill, since we're having these type of issues all across the state.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. So for folks, Senate Bill 357 by Senator Wiener passed in 2022, went into effect January 1 of 2023. That decriminalized loitering for prostitution entirely. So men who were circling the blade to pick up victims couldn't get arrested. Women who were on the blade as sex workers or victims also couldn't get arrested. The bill really, the stated intent of the bill was to end what they felt was a discriminatory type of enforcement. But instead of rooting out discriminatory enforcement, it rooted out enforcement altogether. So essentially, things began to escalate on the blade, and I can let the sheriff and the DA talk about that in more detail. But what's important to note about this bill is it's actually a totally different approach. It's not putting the bill back that SB 357 abrogated. Instead, it's focusing solely on demand. So it allows law enforcement to intervene when they see a buyer making obvious moves to try and purchase an individual for commercial sex. The officer would have to have probable cause based on a totality of circumstances that sleazy guy in that car is picking up that victim, and would allow them to stop and intervene instead of waiting for something bad to happen.
So this would make it more accessible to conduct investigations.
Yes, to conduct investigations. But in terms of victims or sex workers, this would not have an enforcement impact on them, but it would open up the door for them to get additional support services.
Yeah, I think the tough part with juveniles is obviously a lot has happened in the legislature. In 2016, they decriminalized childhood prostitution. You can't interview juveniles. So here you are trying to rescue juveniles. It's not a crime. You can't interview them. And a lot of traffickers tell them, hey, just walk away. I think the DA said it best. It's like drive-throughs. here in Sacramento, San Diego, statewide, where cars are lined up during the week and the weekends out there to buy, like I said. And those younger girls command a premium. That's what they want, the young girls. And that's why they dress that way. So the bill has been a disaster with that. We've seen it statewide, just a dramatic explosion of juvenile prostitution. And these traffickers, the buyers don't care. They're lined up, it doesn't matter. We could be arresting someone in the same parking lot and another buyer pulls up to buy somebody else because they're so oblivious to it and they don't care. And it is a misdemeanor right now. That is nothing. Misdemeanors, we don't house misdemeanors in jails. They don't go to jails. If you go to jail for a misdemeanor, it's drunk driving because the judge ordered you there, or domestic violence. So these folks don't go to jail at all. So to me, change the narrative with that. Make people afraid to go out and buy these young girls. There has to be some penalty. But a misdemeanor is nothing. And that's the issue. I've got 3,400 inmates in there, and just a handful in there for those misdemeanors, like I said. That's a travesty.
Well, Sheriff, could I ask you, since that bill went into effect, SB 357, it was intended to protect LGBTQ sex workers.
Right.
Is it affecting that, or it hasn't changed since the bill went in effective? I'm asking that correctly.
Here's the irony. Out of contacting probably 300 or 400 sex workers, we had 3 that were LGBTQ, and that's the big issue. And you can't talk to anybody about it because it's sacred. It's a sacred cow. But if you look into it, and in San Diego too, I talked to the mayor in San Diego, that is not the issue with it. They purport it to be. No one's ever done any studies, but I have the numbers, I have the data of the arrests we made and the persons we contacted. So it's really just not there. And to the detriment of our young girls. And that's really been the big issue. Because everyone talks about data, and data is key.
So maybe the bill caused unintended consequences.
It was.
Okay.
It was. So much has happened, and then also, these young girls. And my big thing is, if they're taken into protective custody, they go to a group home, and they become traffickers themselves. They traffic other young girls. We need something to help our young women, and it's tough. We've taken girls home that were 13 years old, and they went back to the trafficker because that's so powerful. They have so much influence over them. And like I said, this is a new way to really address the buyers with that. And hopefully it changes and scares the hell out of these men to stop abusing our young girls. That's the hope.
Just to tag on, it might not be necessarily reflected in the sheriff's studies, but there are other studies that suggest that LGBTQ youth are overrepresented in the victim population. Not in the buyer population, but in the victim population. So it's really important that when we're working with community-based organizations that they are set up to fully support that population. I think that's a really important feature of this bill because what we're setting up is a victim support fund for community-based organizations that are survivor-led. They will be in the best position to work with those kids and those young people, no matter what issues they present with. To try and help them get off of the blade and get into a better life. Yes?
Does your bill do anything further for the traffickers, or are you just hoping to dry up enough demand that what they do doesn't happen as much anymore?
This bill is targeted at demand and at victim support, so it doesn't increase the penalties any further for the traffickers. We do think that because of this bill, investigations of traffickers will be easier because law enforcement will be able to intervene, and oftentimes law enforcement can get information from buyers who they're arresting that can lead to traffickers. Any other questions? All right, thank you so much, everyone.